Well, what's up, you beautiful people? This is Gary Horn, and this is Pro Wrestling, the podcast celebrating the past, present, future, history, legacy, and tradition of the greatest sport of all time, professional wrestling. And I am here, as always, with my hetero life mates. This is Dr. Stinson, the doctor. Hello.
What's up, everybody?
And also this masked man in the corner to that side over there. This guy used to be Will Martin. I'm not sure who he's going as now. Hello,
no,
Will.
That's not Will. Will never wears his hat canted like that.
My name is Mill Wharton.
Mill Wharton?
Ooh, Mill Wharton.
The great luchador.
You're an idiot, man.
Just kidding. It's too hot under here.
Whoa, it is. Man. Hold on, it is Will.
Oh, it's Will. Congratulations. Hey, Will. It's so good to see you.
Good to have me, man.
Speaking of hellos, hello
never use that persona again.
Hello to Front Row. Hello to Brian Rosa. Hello, Woodland Goblin. Hello, Roscoe. Hello, Ryan. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're happy to be here. Today is just a simple, casual, laid-back time, and we're going to talk about masked wrestlers today. It's just a roundtable talking about masked wrestlers. And yeah, that's it. Thanks, Ryan, for hitting us up on YouTube and Facebook. That makes us feel good to have viewers in both spots. Guys, how you been doing?
It was a great day, man. Great. Happy Easter, everybody. To all my friends and everybody. We had a fantastic get together with Tanya's parents today, and did Easter egg hunts and the whole thing. And all day we've been talking about mass wrestling, believe it or not, because she asked first thing this morning what our show topic was going to be tonight, and I'm like, man, we're talking about mass wrestlers. We're doing this roundtable thing on Sunday nights now, and so we've been talking about that literally all day long on Easter Sunday.
Well, that's good. I wish that's what I had been talking about all day on Easter Sunday. I've been with family, and they didn't want to talk about masked wrestlers. Will, how you been?
Good, man. My internet is creeping, so if you see my camera cut out, it's because I'm trying to actually hear what you guys are saying, because I missed everything you guys just said. But yeah, I'm stoked to be talking about masked wrestlers. It's a cool topic. I'm excited for us to be doing these roundtable discussions on Sunday nights. I think it'll be fruitful. Had some great conversation in our Discord earlier about this topic, so looking forward to jumping into it.
Perfect. Well, unless you guys have something else, I mean, we can just jump right into it and start talking about masked wrestlers. I don't know if you guys have a place you want to start. In our Discord, there were lots of fans of Lucha Libre, and I guess the best place I should bring this up, Rob, is you can shed some light on this. You educated us on the Opera Cup on our latest episode of Pro Wrestling History, which you can find over at TIPW Show. You hit us up on any of the social medias in the bio. You can find a link to our podcast. If you follow This Is Pro Wrestling and subscribe, we're doing a history of pro wrestling, and episode 4 of that, we've worked our way through the history of pro wrestling. We're working out the framework, and we are at the early 1900s, the Opera Cup, and the big tournament where one of the main attractions at that tournament that caused all kinds of media scruffles, kerfluffles, all kinds of uffles.
Truffles.
Truffles. It was a guy by the name of the Masked Marvel. And he made his first appearance, and the media couldn't handle it. They were like looking for, who is this guy? What is this guy about? And so they were like stalking him everywhere. So if you guys aren't familiar with that story, you got to check out that episode of This Is Pro Wrestling History. But feels like a good place to start, I suppose. Rob, where were you thinking?
No, I agree. Yeah. And I think we make the point to say very clearly in that particular discussion, depending on which version of the discussion you guys hear, but we made the point to say that the masked Marvel may have been the first great masked wrestler of notoriety, but he probably was not the first. And if you just do some light Googling and look at the Wikipedia article on masked wrestlers, you'll find that as early as the 1865 World Fair. There's a wrestler that does show up quite a bit in our discussions, T-Bone Bauer, that may or may not is alleged to have wrestled under a mask known as a very creative and original name, the Masked Wrestler. A lot of mystery surrounding that name. There is some debate over whether or not it was really T-Bone Bauer. I think there was one other guy that's name was thrown in the mix. But, most people agreed that was that. And then the first guy to really, really become a sensation, as it were, was Masked Superstar, or excuse me, the Masked Marvel, who we allege to be Mort Henderson. Again, there are some people that say that Mort Henderson wasn't the Masked Marvel, but I think most of us, would say that that's probably not even a debate anymore.
Will, you just look.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm getting bits and pieces. I'm getting bits and pieces of everything you guys are saying. So until my internet is more stable, I'm not gonna just interject because I may be saying something you already said. But
I think you should just interject and see if you could guess what we're saying. Like, just
okay. Well, I mean, just in case you guys don't know, we talked about on episode 4 of the history podcast.
Oh man, so I think a common misconception. We were talking about this a little bit beforehand, but like Lucha Libre is well known for masked wrestling, but it's not really necessarily where it began, and it may have evolved somewhat out of that. But there's an interesting history with masks. Just to throw that in there. I mean, we've all got a lot of favorites, but I guess that the standard knowledge right now is that the Mexican wrestlers, Lucha Libre, like, it seem to be the ones that really carry the torch for masked wrestling right now. But it wasn't always that way, right?
Right. I mean, masked wrestling, and jump in anytime, Will. Masked wrestling was largely a European and then later an American and Canadian phenomenon. And at some point, a man by the name of Cyclone McKay ended up working down in Mexico briefly, and was an American guy, and it just took on there. You'll see people talk about the Aztec, Incan, and Mayan influence in masked wrestling in the Lucha Libre style. And while it probably did not originate that way, again, the very first masked person of note in Mexico was an American. That certainly doesn't mean that it did not grow to have all that significance, because I think now in the landscape, masked wrestling is far more important there than in any other place in the world, and it's very, very serious. It's semi-religious there. It has a spiritual connotation, and my wife and I, we were talking before we went live. My wife and I like to vacation in Tulum, Mexico. It's a beautiful area, but there in the popular culture, it's everywhere. I mean, there are murals. They have restaurants. I mean, masked wrestling is it. And it's just very, very much a part of the it seems like at some point, most wrestlers who start, who break into Lucha Libre style at some point are going to don a mask in their career down there. But fantastic, man. It's just a beautiful culture. It's very rich. It's become much more rich than how it began, I guess is what we're trying to say. Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that when we decided we were going to dive into this topic, and I was digging around a little bit, I just kind of, I guess, assumed based on the current landscape of pro wrestling that, the origins were in Mexico with Lucha Libre style. But, like you said, I mean, it was European, North American, and eventually caught hold down there. But I will say that you can go back and look, the European, the North American masked wrestlers were very not creative. They were just solid color masks, usually looked pretty dull. And so the Lucha Libre, the Mexican, promotions that picked it up and really ran with it, took it and evolved it into something super creative. And like you said, kind of a religion. I mean, a very, strong hold in their wrestling culture, and they really elevated it and made it, what it is today when we think about a masked wrestler and the different, ornamental headpieces that they wear and the rich history there. It definitely became that down in Mexico. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, to look at how it's evolved from that. And even, I'm sure we'll get into it, but what does it mean today? I mean, in 2021, mass wrestling is obviously still a thing, but how big of a thing, and what place does it have in wrestling? It's just always an interesting thought and conversation to have.
Gary, there have been, I mean, this conversation could go a lot of directions. I mean, you have different uses of the mask, where sometimes mask has been used to conceal an identity. Sometimes mask is the persona, like in the Lucha Libre style, where, they kind of take on that what's the avatar, as it were. And then there have been masks used to extend careers. There's not even agreement, and this came up in our chats on social media today, even with David Marquez. They're not even universal agreement on what constitutes a masked wrestler. So that's great, because some would say, you had Abyss that was a masked wrestler, and Marquez, who's more of a traditionalist, would say no, he didn't. He didn't wear a mask. I mean, he certainly wore a face covering, but he didn't have the mask in the classical sense. And then you have to look at, well, what about wrestlers who at one point wore a mask as part of their gimmick or part of their style? And then you have to throw in names like Cahagas and the Great Muta, who wore face paint but would often wear masks to the ring and then take the mask off. You've got, I guess the Abyss question is really interesting, because it doesn't look like a traditional mask where, your identity is tied up with the mask. But again, I don't think that's essential to what a masked wrestler is. And you've got a lot of wrestlers that kind of fall into that style of mask wearing when you think of people like Big Van Vader or Kane or even the Fiend that wear those types of face coverings that aren't more traditional. But I mean, I guess I think, I don't want to quibble too much here. I think Marquez makes a good point. If you want to talk about your traditional masked wrestler, like your masked guy, Blue Demon Jr. is your NWA World Champion who was a masked wrestler, whereas Abyss, Kane, Vader at one point or another did or didn't wear a mask, or the mask was more part of just the aesthetic of their costume or ring outfit. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. It's
and
interesting. Oh, go ahead, Will.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I mean, that's a great, I think, place to start this discussion. What constitutes as, a masked wrestler? And we're getting, different answers in the chats. But one that stuck out to me that you just mentioned that I kept reading about in conversations about masked wrestlers was Big Van Vader, who, I know at times he wore more of a face covering mask, especially when he was in Japan. But, as we know, throughout his career, he had kind of the strap mask that really did nothing to conceal his identity. And then you got guys like Mankind, who obviously we all knew who it was. It was not an identity concealer. It was part of the persona and part of the character. And didn't cover up his whole face either. So, I mean, I think that's a great place to start. I mean, for me, from my opinion, I do think I lean a little more traditional in the sense that, like, when you say to me a masked wrestler, that is somebody whose identity is concealed, and their, you know what I mean? Their face is covered. I don't know who it is. And so I'm not saying, don't throw guys like Vader and Mankind and stuff like that into the mix. But that's not typically what I first think of when I'm thinking of a masked wrestler.
I don't think it's that way for me either. Like, I think generally I think of like the full mask that I always have, like your Rey Mysterios and that kind of thing. But it is interesting because when it got brought up and like every place that discussion's been going on, I've seen our buddy Carnivore J, who like jumps in on the Discord all the time. He's in the chat. His first go-to was Mankind. Mankind was the first guy that he started paying attention to in WWE, and he considered him a masked wrestler. Like, that was the first name that came out. So it's hard to deny like those guys. And you certainly do see folks like Vader and that sort of thing included in those conversations.
Right. If you mean, the mask is a covering, just merely a covering, then, where does that land you with like face paint? Because again, you have like the Great Muta or Cahagas, who did wear masks. Now they would come to the ring in mask, elaborate masks, kind of like Big Van Vader's, and then they would take it off, and invariably at some point in their career, they would still have face paint on. The identity point is a really interesting point. And by the way, I think that these kinds of discussions are very fruitful. I think they only enrich our investigation and are delving deep into the history of the sport. So I don't get bent out of shape if Dave Marquez wants to say that Abyss is not a masked wrestler. I know what he's talking about. I get it. And I don't get bent out of shape if someone wants to stand by their guns and say, no, Abyss was a masked wrestler and he was the first. I'm cool with either way. I think we're getting at different things there. But what is a mask? You know, what makes a mask? What constitutes a mask? And for me, the identity thing doesn't even do it either, because then you have points in history where masks were worn as a loophole and kind of as a flip the bird to authority. In the case of one of my favorite masked wrestlers, the Midnight Rider, obviously in the case of Question Mark, who, we all knew exactly who he was. And then like guys like the Patriot, who looked a lot like Hulk Hogan. I can't verify that he was. Obviously, he always seemed to hold his head a little bit differently. Hogan never did that. He had just a slight millimeter. His arms were just a slight millimeter, a little bit.
I think you're talking about Mr. America, right?
Yeah, Mr. America. Yeah. That's what I mean. Not the Patriot. Gosh, forgive me.
That's old.
But it's just. I think these kinds of discussions, I'd love to get in. Go day drinking, go down to Chattanooga downtown, go do a bar, and just sit there and hash the debate out. Is Abyss or masked wrestler or not? What constitutes a mask? Is it an identity issue?
What are we doing right now?
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm saying. These are great.
No, we have to be day drinking in Chattanooga. That's the only way. So sorry. Thanks everyone for joining.
Hey, one of us is. Yeah, Blue Blazer. I see Blue Blazer in there. Yes, indeed.
All right.
No.
I guess if you're going to press me, I'm going to come down.
Cheers, everybody.
I'm going to probably come down on the.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and answer the question.
We're not going to get those Queen harmonies intact with us. Just like, I don't know where our connection's at. I think we're like weird on a connection or something. But anyway,
we have to let's raise our hands. If you need to speak, raise your hands, and Gary will call on you. No,
I guess I was just gonna. Go ahead, Will.
I was just gonna say that for me, that if you're going to be logical about it, a masked wrestler is technically anyone who wears a mask. So Vader's a masked wrestler, Mankind's a masked wrestler, Abyss, is a masked wrestler. So like technically but when you talk in terms of like wrestling philosophy, there's a different connotation a masked wrestler has for me personally, which is when I think of, the Midnight Rider and, guys like, Black Scorpion and Yellow Dog and all those WCW masked wrestlers that I had growing up, where the hidden identity was kind of the draw of it. And there's a difference between the hidden identity thing, like you're talking about too, and wrestlers who made their careers as a masked wrestler who you don't know their identity. That was who they were, so there's definitely different levels of being a masked wrestler.
Yeah, I'd go for a tiered system. There are tiers to what is and isn't a mask. You've got a classical sense where I think is where Marquez came down at. That's probably kind of like where my heart is, just being a traditionalist. I'm just shocked to find out that Cobra Moon is Brian Rose's wife. He married that lady. She's phenomenal. Did you see that? Anyway, I thought he was.
He
married
said his
Thunder
wife
Rosa.
Spoiled it for him. I don't think he said that.
Oh, okay, maybe
her,
he's
right?
Not
That's not the same person.
I had no clue. Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I had no clue who Cobra Moon was until. Gotcha. I see.
I mean, I don't know. Nobody knows who Cobra Moon is.
You got a classical definition where you got your mass superstars, your Mr. Wrestling 2, your spoilers, your Dr. X's, your sensational intelligent destroyers, all those guys like that. And then you've got your second tier, which would be anybody that dons a face covering in the exercise of wrestling, and that would be your Abysses and your Mankinds and Vaders, not really concealing the identity. It's more for aesthetic or intimidation. And then you got a third tier that sometimes incorporates a mask in their in their ring gear, but doesn't necessarily wrestle in a mask. And I'm thinking of guys like Muta and Cahagas, who I think Muta might wrestle in a mask from time to time, but I know they both come to the ring frequently, or they came to the ring frequently in masks and then would take them off. You know, I know, guys like the Great Kabuki and Muta also employed that Kabuki style, but they weren't, it wasn't like part of their ring gear that they were wrestling in. So you got tiers of what constitutes mass wrestling. So it's really interesting, man. I guess my heart lies in the I guess the classic school of thought that Blue Demon Jr. There's no doubting. It's kind of like, gosh, and I hate this analogy, but someone talks about like pornography. You can't really define it, but you know it when you see it. You know what I mean? I know Gary does. A mass wrestler in a classic sense, you can't really define it, but you know it when you see it.
Well, it's interesting. Just had a similar conversation on the movie podcast about horror movies. Like, you can't argue like what scares you. You can't argue someone being out of being scared. So like it's all subjective. So
like, is Jaws a horror movie?
Right. If it scares you, it's a scary movie. The same often works with porn. Can't argue somebody out of a boulder. So anyway, so this is the kind of stuff you only get on the Sunday night shows. You can't get this on the Tuesday night on the official NWA channel shows. So welcome. Glad to be here. Rob, let me ask you this. If you had to pick, like right now, thinking about it off the cuff, who is your favorite masked wrestler? And I want to know in the chat too. Throw them up. Who your favorite masked wrestlers are? But Rob, I'm interested.
Yeah, man. I've got 3 or 4 that immediately I love them, man. They're among my favorites, period, masked or not. Obviously, as of late, just because of the influence it had on my children and them growing up, and this being sort of the catalyst for Piper, especially to get into wrestling, I'm always going to have a special place in my heart for Joseph Hudson and the question mark. I think he was so creative and so intelligent, and was so familiar with the history of the business that he played the masked wrestler part to the nines. I mean, he nailed it perfectly. He did everything. When he was in the mask, he was in the mask. He didn't break character. And Gary, you've been at power tapings in the past where he's come out all sweaty as Joseph Hudson and like, hey, what's been going on? Like, just as though you don't know what's going on, So there is a sense in which emotionally, I'm never going to get over the question mark. I think that it was just brilliant. I love them. When you look at in the whole history of wrestling, the scope of wrestling since I've been familiar with it, which would have been I first started getting into wrestling. My earliest memories of wrestling, I guess, would have been like 1979, 1980 when I was 4 or 5 years old. And so there were some names that, just because I was more familiar with them growing up, that always stuck with me and meant something to me. I can't help being something of an educated fan to always love like Mil Mascaras and El Santo, but I didn't grow up with them. I read about them in PWI. I would see them, but I never got to really experience them growing up, just only from afar. But the people that I did grow up with were like Dr. X, the memory of Dr. X, the Destroyer, Dick Beyer resonated in our house. So my dad was a big Dr. X fan. He only went as Dr. X in the AWA until like 72. I wasn't born yet, but my dad was a huge Dr. X fan. And he was like the first wrestler to have like a cult phenomenon. They had Dr. X t-shirts. There are magazines that I have on my shelf over here back from the 60s and 70s where you could buy these masks from him, I always like the masked superstar, Bill Eadie. Many people know him as Demolition Axe. He played a couple of different personas, but masked superstar may be the greatest. Gosh, man, growing up in Georgia and the Carolina area, his feud with Blackjack Mulligan. I was born in 76. This feud with Blackjack Mulligan happened in 1978. And that summer they had correct me if I'm right. It was like a dozen 90-minute cage matches. 90-minute cage matches now. Blackjack Mulligan and Masked Superstar. And of course, Masked Superstar, Mr. Wrestling #2, had an epic feud in the Georgia area, which is where I'm from. Mr. Wrestling #2 was fantastic. But if you're going to push me and pick, I have to pick my favorite masked persona of all time next to like someone that has an emotional connection to me, like question mark, I'd have to say it's probably the Midnight Rider, Dusty Rhodes. I think that story is so intriguing, so hilarious. It had all the trappings of good story writing, intrigue, but it never lost that prize fighting feel either that we're so proud of because, technically, the Midnight Rider defeated Flair for the championship and would have been the champion if only he had unmasked. The only problem is he couldn't unmask. Well, I don't know if he could or couldn't, but he would not unmask. And some people think that because underneath that mask was actually the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, who was serving a 60 or 90-day suspension at the time. And that would have meant permanent expulsion from Florida, championship wrestling from Florida, which is where this whole angle was being played out at the time during the territory days. So gosh, man, there's so many good ones, but those that I named, from a reverential standpoint, El Santo, Mil Mascaras, but like from a fan, like the ones that I admire that I could just sit there and watch footage of all day, Mr. Wrestling 2, Dr. X, the Masked Superstar, and the Midnight Rider. Those are my tops, man.
But Rob, what about when the Midnight Rider suddenly got in really good shape and appeared with Dusty Rhodes?
Right,
so I mean, they were there together.
That's the hole in the argument, right? That's the hole in the argument. We have seen Dusty Rhodes and the Midnight Rider together. He looked a lot like looked very similar to Sam Houston, looked kind of like Magnum TA sometimes, even had the Magnum TA curls hanging back. I mean, at any point, that's the mystery of the Midnight Rider. He was on to some Mongrovian magic or something because he could shape shift and take on different bodily appearances at the snap of a finger. But yeah, no, you raise a good point, Will.
We'll throw it into the chat there. We've got some folks like Jared Fritz there saying Serpentico is the current favorite masked wrestler. Dead Ahead RA says Juan Cena is his favorite. Brian Rose is saying Sexy Star is his son's favorite masked wrestler, and well, we know why that is. And Front Row says huge fan of La Luchadora. And let's see here, John Farmer, Super Destroyer, and let's see here, Brian Rose to throw it in. Mr. Wrestling 1 and 2 were his favorites.
Mr. Wrestling 1, by the way, incidentally, is the favorite wrestler of the governor of Georgia.
I was going to bring that up. When we went to the Capitol, it was the weirdest freaking thing when we walked in there. The Senator Mike Mullis, first one.
Jeff Mullis.
Oh, Jeff Mullis, sorry. When we first walked in there, he was just like, which one of you is wrestling 1? That was like the first question. And then we went and met the governor, and he was like, who's wrestling 1? And I remember looking at Rob and being like, why is Mr. Wrestling 1 the go-to wrestler for these guys?
Well, they're both. Out of all they can't say Mr. Wrestling 2 because he had that famous iconic photograph of Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter, Georgia's only president, was a Democrat, and both Kemp and Mullis are Republicans. So they have to go with Tim Woods, Mr. Wrestling 1, as the go-to.
Let's see here. Dave Scooby loved the Masked Machines. James Lawrence throwing in the Patriot, Lasertron, and Thunderfoot as his favorite wrestlers. Brian Rosa says biggest hyped masked wrestler that was a bust was Glacier. Yeah. Front Row, of course, throwing in Shockmaster. I'm sure that was your favorite. James Lawrence, Vader. But yeah. So I asked Rob, that's what got that conversation started. Still interested in what all of you think, so please let us know. And also, if you're new here, hit subscribe. We'd love to have you be a regular part of the show. But Will, who is your favorite masked wrestler? Gun to head right now. Literally, putting a gun to your head.
My favorite of all time and my childhood is Jushin Thunder Liger. That was the first real, because I was a WCW kid and he was very active in the WCW in the 90s. and had so many great matches. And I just loved, his mask was not the standard just head covering mask. He had the kind of horns coming out of it, and I mean, we can all agree, just a legend of the sport. But the first exposure I had as a kid to masked wrestlers was actually Doom, when they were still being managed by a woman, and they were feuding with the Steiners. And I think we watched a match of theirs when we did our watch along of Starrcade '89, that round robin tournament that we've mentioned a lot here frequently. But they were still masked at the time, and then in Clash of Champions 10, they were demasked when they lost to the Steiners, and then, as we know, they continued on as unmasked, Butch Reed and Ron Simmons. But another one that sticks out in my mind, and I mentioned him earlier, but was Yellow Dog, who was Brian Pillman. But there was a lot of controversy around his identity. I think Z-Man, Tom Zink, was thrown in the mix there at some point. But that was one of the first storylines I remember as a kid when I had first actually got into wrestling that involved a hidden identity masked wrestler. But Jushin Thunder Liger, in the traditional sense of a masked wrestler that you don't know their identity. But if you're going to ask me, the logical side of me, that's like any wrestler that wears a head covering, for me, it's Big Van Vader. It just, to me, those are, as I said earlier, kind of two different things. But Vader was he was the guy. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. Mine was always Arachnaman from WCW.
Naturally, is that your background, Gary?
Yeah, that's me. I'm showing a picture of Arachnaman here, and if you look above his left shoulder there, that's me just giving him the
mouth
whoop,
open.
Whoop, 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 whoop.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
From
I'm
Arsenio
yelling,
Hall.
Whoop there. I'm hearing whoop. There it is. That is what I'm yelling.
Hey, put
to
that picture back
Arachnaman.
up real quick, man. I think I see Dusty Rose in the audience. Put that. Look at his as you're facing it. This hand on the right. Look right there.
Oh wow, yeah, that is.
It's like
that
Dusty Rose back.
What
I don't know, man. It looks like him.
is he doing back there? Arachnaman. Who would have thunk it? That was a weird character. That one's always stuck out in my mind. I was a big Spider-Man fan, so I always remembered Arachnaman. Nobody, Brian Rosa in the chat, making sure we mention La Parka. Nobody's mentioned La Parka yet, but yeah, always loved La Parka. The chairman, he's currently wrestling on a MLW right now, and Hio de La Parka, I think. And there's another one too, and I can't remember. There's a third one, but Los Parks. They got like a trio there. But anyway, always loved those. Let's see here. And Ryan Wilcox mentioning Kamala wore a Ugandan mask to the ring occasionally. That's true. There are plenty of those. I was looking through some lists, like trying to think of masked wrestlers I wasn't thinking of. There was Rob. There was Charlie Brown from Out of Town. Do you remember him?
Charlie Brown was another good one, man. When I think back to those territory days in Carolina, the Mid-South, and Georgia Championship Wrestling, Charlie Brown was a character that was invoked by Jimmy Boogie Woogie Man Valiant. And he was this was part and parcel of what seemed to be his eternal war with Paul Jones and his army, man. They feuded. Jimmy Valiant and Paul Jones feuded for like the first half of my whole life, man, from 76 all the way up until, Crockett Promotions finally, it had to have been until 87 or 88, man. They were at it. But Charlie Brown, man, was Jimmy Valiant. Allegedly. I can't prove it. There's they hadn't done DNA testing or anything, but he was a good one too, man. He was we always cracked up when he would come out. My dad was a big Jimmy Boogie Woogie Man Valiant fan as well. So,
well, what else? What else should we talk about with masked wrestlers? I've got a few places we could go, but Rob, did you have something in mind you were thinking of right off the top of your head?
No. John Stallman points out again, for those who have just now come in, that you have masked wrestling as early as the 1860s. We touched on this earlier. in France, I believe. Yes, France at the World Expo or the World Fair, and he evidently was T-Bode Bauer, who was wrestling under the persona of the masked wrestler, and then he comes to the States, and there was some confusion and rumors over there. Perhaps might have been another guy that was actually the masked wrestler, and then you get to the Opera Cup in 1915, 1916, and the Masked Marvel really becomes the first masked wrestler of any renown. And I would put an asterisk on the masked wrestler thing. We don't know. I'm always afraid to say this is the first because someone smarter than us always comes back and says, actually, in 1803 in the colonies, there was a guy named Sir Benedict, Sir Benedict the Mask, Sir Benedict Cumbermask, and there's always or something, so. But
that doesn't sound good.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, so I always my go-to when I think of a masked wrestler sometimes is do you remember when Demolition existed? They were great as painted face. They also wore masked wrestlers, but one of them, Barry Darsow, also went on to be this great masked wrestler, the Repo Man. Look at him. He's
the Hamburglar.
He's happy and he's hugging on his thing there, his little chain, his toe cable, toe rope. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention the Repo Man as one that wasn't going to get any love unless I brought him up. So I'm happy to have done so.
Correct.
Okay. What about, do you remember when The Undertaker wore a mask? How about that?
The Phantom of the Ring there.
Yeah, I can't. Go ahead, Rob. I know you want to bust out the song.
Yeah, sing us a song.
Sing once again with me.
Do it in Undertaker voice.
Sing once again. There you go. Or what about Mantar? Remember Mantar?
Oh, Jesus.
Incidentally, he is the official masked wrestler of Manscaped. So,
which if you use code NWA Pod for 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com, so you don't end up like Mantar. Anyway,
Mantar.
And
I like how you say
Ryan
that.
Wilcox pointing out the machines in WWF. Andre as the Giant Machine. Let's see here. Dave Scooby says, spent a summer in Dallas and saw Bruiser Brody at WCCW. Suddenly he disappeared. The next week, Red River Jack showed up to face Skandar Akbar's army. It was crazy.
Mm-hmm. Red River Jack, man. Very, very similar size and build, which was unusual in those days. I mean, you had guys like Black Jack Mulligan that were really big. We referenced him earlier, but yeah, that was, I remember that. That was great.
I was even looking through stuff earlier at Corporal Kirshner. He came in as Leatherface at one time, so to do the Texas Chainsaw Massacre gimmick. I mean, he wasn't murdering people with the chainsaw or anything, I don't think, but
thank God.
Yeah. John Stallman also pointing out the other half of Demolition there. Bill Eadie was as Axe was also the masked superstar. So
Bill Eadie is an interesting guy. He always seemed to be, he started in 1972 as a masked wrestler, as the medic. He broke into the business. Bill Eadie did. And then later on, he played Bolo Mongol, which wasn't masked, but he definitely didn't look like he looks. Like he looks. I mean, would wear makeup and would have the Mongolian hairstyle. And then George Scott, I think it was, suggested the masked superstar gimmick. He was even trained by Boris Malenko, I think, to wrestle with a distinct style. And he became one of the greats. Again, he's definitely in the upper echelon of great masked wrestlers of all time. Had a great feud with Mr. Wrestling #2, which is generally considered the greatest masked wrestler versus masked wrestler feud in history. Their matches are legendary. And then we mentioned earlier, I don't know if we were live yet, but Will and I were talking about his legendary feud with the great Black Jack Mulligan in 1970. Yeah, I mentioned at the top of the show, 12 cage matches in the summer of 78 that each went 90 minutes long. So masked superstar Bill Eadie, one of the greats, man.
Man, so I was just watching the chat here, and lots of people just bringing up mass wrestlers in the chat. And let's see here. Eric Dale saying worst masked wrestler was Texas Red. That guy never amounted to anything. And John Stallman did Mantar wrestle with that mask? No, I don't think he wore that mask in the ring. I think he took the big helmet off, sort of like Vader.
I think he had a regular one on under that.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well,
I was just going to say here locally in the.
What is happening?
Go, Rob.
No.
Here locally in the Chattanooga area at the American Wrestling Federation, there's a guy that called Robbie Roode, and after his suspension, someone came in under a mask by the name of Roberto Grosero, and it was it's very intriguing to me. But anyway, go ahead, Gary.
No, I was, it was funny. I was going to bring up Robbie Roode, but I didn't want to, I know he's like a kind of a controversial figure. Did he get some kind of lawsuit? Did something to do with farm animals or something like that? I feel like
he's a jerk, man. He's a jerk. And those are only allegations. First of all, none of that was proven.
No, I had to bring up that, we had Brian Rosa bringing up, Mascarito was a great mini wrestler. And John Stallman mentioning wasn't Eddie Gilbert, Freddy Krueger in Japan as well. And I was like, what is this guy talking about? And it turns out, look at that. Freddy Krueger in Japan. And he's slicing open foreheads with his knife fingers. So, yeah, Freddy Krueger as a master wrestler. There you go.
Holy cow.
Mr. Gilbert. So, congratulations. I did not know about that before now.
Yeah, and one thing that I was going to mention too, Ryan Romano brought this up in the chat, but the wife of the Real World's champion, Mickie James, did appear back in 2017 as part of a tag team, La Luchadora, and it ended up being her and Alexa Bliss. But as Front Row mentions here, it was actually for most of the matches that they had on SmackDown, the non-Alexa Bliss character was Deonna Purrazzo, which is pretty interesting. So she was under the mask for a while, but then when they got to the unmasking, it ended up being Mickie James. So that was a cool storyline. You don't see a lot of that happening in female wrestling, so that was pretty cool to see that in the last few years.
Absolutely.
Who was the girl, guys? All the Mission Pro fam. There was a girl that wrestled under a mask. They're here either the last show or the show before that. Black Widow, I think was her name. Very good.
Oh, yeah.
She's a local in the a mainstay in the Texas area, and I was really impressed with her. She looked great. She had a lot of charisma and moved well about the ring, and just got a fantastic look. I think her name was Black Widow. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, if Rose is in there still. I know Ryan Romano probably knows the answer.
Yeah, and Ryan Romano also mentioning, Brian Rose is saying it is Black Widow.
Yeah, I liked her a lot, man.
The Ryan Romano also mentioned Insidious one earlier, so that's worth mentioning as well, as a masked wrestler, female masked wrestler. So very cool. And John Stallman wants us to not forget the Memphis legends of Tagar, Lord of the Volcano, and the Christmas Creature. So definitely worth mentioning those two as well. Let's see here. I was looking at what that came to my mind just now as we were sitting here talking too was the Black Scorpion. I don't think we brought up the Black Scorpion, but there's another masked wrestling story that was like a main event program. And so just kind of cool to remember these things. For those that don't know, he was tormenting Sting, the Black Scorpion, and turned out to be Sting's arch nemesis, Ric Flair, under the mask once it was all said and done. Not the whole time, but would it matter?
Right. I think at one point, again, and you have to correct me, Gary, I believe early on when Jim Herd was, batting this idea around, I think it was Al Perez was the original Black Scorpion. I could be wrong about that. That name seems to come to mind. They wanted Flair to shave his head and come out as like some Roman gladiator, guy, and you're like, he's Ric Flair. You don't put Ric Flair, you don't shave his head. He's Ric Flair, you know. Just like to answer Ryan Romano's question earlier, you don't put Nick Aldis in a mask, bro. So, yeah, I see James Lawrence. Al Perez is correct.
Yeah. And John Stallman was thinking it should have been Ole. And Ryan Wilcox asking an excellent question: does the gobbledygooker count?
He'd be a good, I guess, in the second tier, right? Or no, I guess he'd be a classic first tier because we don't know who, you know, the gobbledygooker,
but he was one of the Guerreros. He was Hector Guerrero, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So
I think so, yeah. Classic.
Eddie Guerrero wore a mask for a little while, I feel like. No, Brian Russell even pointed that out in the chat. Eddie Guerrero used to wear the mask also. So interesting. I have a list of best and worst masks of all time. Black Scorpion was on that list. That's what brought it up to me.
Was it on the best or worst?
That was on the worst. There's a lot I don't even remember from the worst. There was a Barry Windham one here from like Slamboree 94. And I don't even remember.
Yeah, wasn't he? Barry Windham did the dirty yellow dog thing too, didn't he?
Yeah, he was Yellow Dog. There was a few iterations of Yellow Dog. The one I mentioned earlier was Brian Pillman, and that was after Barry Windham had originally done it. So it was kind of a recurring mask gimmick.
Yeah, there was the Miz as the Calgary Kid.
Yes.
Devon apparently worked under a mask when it came to the Aces and Eights program. They mentioned Shockmaster here. There's the Butcher, which, you know, the Butcher, that was just Halloween Havoc 94. The Butcher he was Bruce and Barber Beefcake. But he bounced around gimmicks pretty regularly. He was the Zodiac, the Man with No Name, the Booty Man, which is my favorite, and the Disciple. But so, and apparently Vince Russo in TNA in 2004 went as Mr. Wrestling 3. So there's that. But some weird gimmicks. Let's see here. What's our chat saying? Yeah, Battle Cat got brought up. That was an interesting one. I keep seeing bounced around. Also, John Sullivan said Eddie was the second Black Tiger. Tiger Mask Nemesis in the comics. And Benoit was the Pegasus Kid. You had Just Incredible. He was Aldo Montoya there for a while. Max Moon, which I think was Conan at first, right? And anyway, whatever happened to Los Conquistadores? Yeah. But all right. Well, I do have Bleacher Report did a top 35 masked wrestlers specific of all time. Yeah, they went 35. Who are the 35 greatest masked wrestlers of all time? We can do the top 10, or if you want to hear, I can run through the earlier ones. I
feel like that they wanted to do a top 50 and they just got to 35 and couldn't think of any more. Whoever was putting it together.
It feels like an odd number to aim for.
I
mean, I'm looking at it, and the 35. I mean, like number 35 is Delirious, who we haven't mentioned at all. So there's Delirious. He's 35. 34 is El Generico. We haven't mentioned El Generico at all, aka Sami Zayn. And yeah, Brian Rosa mentioned Dr. Wagner Jr. How can we forget him? That's a good one. Ryan Romano wants the list, so we're going to run through the list. I hope you're ready. So number 33, the Hurricane. Number 32, Super Strong Machine, aka Junji Hirata. I was not familiar with him. Let's see here. Oh yeah, wait, he wrestled with Andre the Giant, right, as the Machine. So that's where he comes from. 31 is Abismo Negro in CMLL and AAA. Number 30, the Great Sasuke. And number 29, the Dragon Kid. Number 28, Averno. let's see here. Haven't seen much out of him. El Oriental is number 27. And here is Brian Rosa's request. Number 26 is Dr. Wagner Jr. Number 25 is Juventud Guerrero. Number 24, the Monster Abyss. Former NWA heavyweight champion. Strange.
Easy, Gary. Easy.
What?
You have to qualify that he's a second tier.
Number 23 is the Spoiler. Number 22 is Dos Caras. 21 is Tiger Mask.
Gary, hold on now. Hold on. I'm sorry. Did they provide any rationale on their rankings? Because they rated the Spoiler as what now?
The Spoiler.
And I know you're not about to say Tiger Mask.
Oh, I was. Number 23 was the Spoiler.
All right. The most non-credible list of all time. Go ahead. Proceed.
All right. So yeah, number 21 was Tiger Mask 1. So what they said about it, the popular Tiger Mask gimmick in Japan was based upon the similarly popular anime of the same distinction. The original owner of the Tiger Mask gimmick was Satoru Sayama, who created the gimmick as a means to connect with the New Japan Pro Wrestling audience. Despite owning the Tiger Mask gimmick for just over 1 year, Tiger Mask's influence had a significant influence on the culture of Japanese wrestling and continues to be a staple of Japanese wrestling to this day, with the recent debut of a 5th generation Tiger Mask. All right. So I think there's other Tiger Masks coming. Number 20 is Mr. Wrestling. I think this is 1. And number 19 is 2. Number 18 is Tiger Mask 2, who is played by Masahara Misawa, who they say here, even at number 18 on this list, is arguably the greatest Japanese pro wrestler in history. But, yeah, interesting. Wait,
this
number
top
17
10 better be good, man. There better be some people we're just like not even thinking about.
17
Anyway,
is Tiger Mask 4. 16 is Liz Mark. Number 15, El Kadek. And number 14.
Greater than the Spoiler. Greater than the Spoiler, huh?
Rob's not having it. Number 14, El Hijo del Santo. So that's the son of Del Santo, right? And number 13 is Psychosis. Number 12 is L.A. Park. Now, this is not just for the people that are confused. There were 2 of these guys. I think L.A. Park just passed away, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, La Parka originally lost the rights to his name. La Parka was the one. No, wait, I'm sorry. Am I messing this up? La Parka was the one in WCW, and he lost the rights to the name, so he had to start going by L.A. Park. And so anyway, there you go. Number 11, they have listed here as Mankind. There it is. So now, before we get into the number 10, I see some AEW mentions here in the chat, and there's not going to be any AEW mentions in this list, I don't believe. So I wouldn't hold them to that. Like, obviously, Rey Fenix and Penta El Cerro, they're obviously 2 of the best right now, but they're not in the greatest of all time list right this second. Neil Benedict's not feeling this. He's already like, this is wrong. James Lawrence is calling foul for no Spoiler.
No, he's right, man. The Spoiler is one of the definitely in the top 10, man. There's no way there's a credible list and he's not on the top 10. But anyway, proceed.
So angry. All right, well, let's jump into number 10. Are you ready, Rob? Are you ready to find out? It is Jushin Liger.
I agree.
So they list here, this decorated junior heavyweight is widely regarded as one of the greatest masked wrestlers to ever come out of Japan. Liger has competed in promotions ranging from WCW to New Japan, even Ring of Honor and NXT. showcasing an extended moveset with every stop. His most famous maneuver, the Liger Bomb, has been used by a handful of top main event talents, including Batista. To cement his legacy as a top junior heavyweight, Liger has captured both the WCW and WWF light heavyweight championships during an impressive North American wrestling career. So there you go. Jushin Liger is number 10. Everybody's happy with Liger. Although Neil thinks Liger should be at number 5. We'll see. We'll get to the top 5 here. Let's go down to number 9, and that is Blue Demon. Number 9. There he is. Blue Demon was one of many masked Lucha Libre wrestlers to use their popularity in pro wrestling as a means to launch a movie career. Like El Santo, Blue Demon starred in several luchador films and was even featured in his own self-titled documentary in 1989. Blue Demon in movies was often seen as a cheap replacement for legendary masked wrestler El Santo, with whom Blue Demon had a high-profile feud with in the early 50s. Blue Demon, ladies and gentlemen, number 9. That's not Blue Demon Jr., by the way. That's just the OG Blue Demon. All right. So let's move on and let's go to number 8. Rob, you look like you're anticipating. I like this.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. They list number 8 as Big Van Vader, number 8 on the masked wrestlers list. Vader is arguably the greatest super heavyweight to compete in pro wrestling. His athletic prowess as a 300-pounder made him one of the most imposing forces in a host of both national and international wrestling promotions. So, product of AWA, made a big splash in New Japan, made his way to WCW in 90, and a big-time star in 92, had feuds with the likes of Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Mick Foley, dominated WCW as a multiple-time heavyweight champion. His third world championship reign ended when he lost to Flair in an emotional match with Flair's career on the line. Vader competed in WWE under the moniker Vader and remained similarly as dominant as he came within an eyelash of winning the WWE championship from Shawn Michaels at SummerSlam 1996. So there you have Big Van Vader. That description, by the way, that they just gave made it sound like he should be the number 1 masked wrestler, honestly. So, anyway, lots of people now getting upset about Blue Demon. Well, it's a little too late now. Too late. They already made the list. James Lawrence thinks Vader should be number 1. Anyway, all right. So we're gonna move down to number 7. Are you guys still with me? You guys feeling this? Will, Rob, thoughts so far?
Yeah. So far, I've not been. I mean, I think the list isn't terrible. The top 10. I mean, Vader, I think, runs the. You got to, is he in that same sort of abyss tier of like, is he really a masked wrestler? I don't have a problem with him being considered a masked wrestler. I like Blue Demon in there. Is he top 5? I'm not sure. I mean, he held the NWA championship, so that counts for something. I definitely think Jushin Thunder Liger should be in the top 5. But so far, this list is not a terrible list as far as the top 10 goes.
I'm reserving judgment till the end. I'm waiting to see.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't putting anybody to sleep by reading this list. It's time. It's Vader. Time. Did I do that properly? Dead ahead, RA? I think I did. All right. Number 7 on this list is it's Kane. It's Kane, number 7. Look at that. The Big Red Machine. Kane is one of the most tenured superstars on the WWE roster, going in the Hall of Fame this year, by the way. But he goes all the way back to his days as Isaac Yankem and Fake Diesel at WWE. But he lightning struck when he was at WWE's Bad Blood in 1997 and joined the roster as The Undertaker's little baby brother. He has since terrorized the WWE and is one of 2 superstars in history to win the World Heavyweight Championship, now known as the Universal Championship now, I think, a WWE Championship and ECW Championship. He won them all of the heavyweight titles in WWE. Even though he unmasked in 2003, Kane remains one of the longest tenured veterans on the WWE roster. So there he is. Number 7 is Kane. All right. John Stallman says Vader over Kane. And so is James Lawrence. People, we're losing them. We're losing them, guys. You're not feeling this Bleacher Report list. All right, let's move on to number. I just forgot. Hold on, found it. There, number 6. Rob, are you ready for this? I feel like you might appreciate number 6. I think if we could ever win Rob back, it's with this one. It's gonna be. There he is, Dick Beyer. So maybe I feel like Rob's nodding along. Dick Beyer was a true pioneer in the mass wrestling genre, as he has trained and competed against several of the mass wrestling genre's most prestigious talents from the 50s through the 80s. Beyer showcased his flexibility as a masked wrestler, competing as both the Destroyer and Dr. X. Beyer's outstanding career took him through various NWA territories, mainly on the West Coast. Some of Beyer's most prominent opponents include Bob Backlund, Andre the Giant, and the Funks. And there you go. Destroyer, Dick Beyer.
Dick Beyer is a lot of people credit with him with bringing the mass style to Japan. He wrestled the great Ricky Dozen in like 1963, and they drew 70 million viewers on television for that match, which in for that viewing audience was the highest ever, except for Game 6 of the '86 World Series. According to Ric Flair, Dick Beyer was the greatest practitioner of the figure 4 leg lock. And Shohei Giant Baba, when he retired in '93, picked Beyer as his tag team partner. And so he is one of the greats, whether he was Dr. X or whether he was Destroyer. He deserves to be on that list, maybe even as far up as number 1. So
there you go. All right. Well, let's find out now who comes in at number 5 on this list of the greatest masked wrestlers of all time. It is Ultimo Dragon. They say here, Ultimo Dragon was such a decorated athlete that championship belts were basically part of his wardrobe. As a world-renowned talent by way of Japan, the Dragon migrated to WCW, where he continued his unstoppable path as one of the top cruiserweights in that division. Dragon is credited with creating the Ase Moonsault, used by the likes of Chris Jericho. And while his run in WWE left much to be desired, he will always be regarded as one of the top masked wrestlers to ever compete inside of a wrestling ring. Ultimo Dragon at number 5. I wish I could read all this and see Rob's face at the same time. That's the trouble. I just always want to see what Rob thinks.
Put that picture up real quick, though. Look at that. Look at those belts, man. That Joker literally holding 30 pounds of gold right there. With all he got 30 pounds of gold in addition to the other belts. I love that picture.
That is a cool picture, man. That's always the one I think of when I think of the Ultimo Dragon. I mean, I loved the Ultimo Dragon in WCW, by the way. When I was watching the WCW in the late 90s, like I dug Ultimo Dragon a lot. I thought he was cool. He had some great matches with a lot of people, but he was also, just well known all over the world. Let's see. Ryan Romano says, y'all know more about wrestling, history of wrestling than I do, but it seems to me some of these placements on this list are based more on popularity than what they brought to the ring. Could be. Right.
Bleacher Report? No. Bleacher Report is a credible wrestling publication.
People do love Ultimate Dragon.
Entertainment.
Let's see here. But James Lawrence even going in on, I loved the Dragon Sleeper. So did I, buddy. I always thought that was a cool move. All right. So let's find out who comes in at number 4. This is a weird one to me, I think. But I obviously, maybe more of our wrestling fans out of Mexico will appreciate this a little bit more. I wasn't familiar with him before his latest run, which did not go well. Number 4 is Mystico. They say you might know him these days as Sin Cara, but when it all is said and done, he more likely want to take credit for being the guy who portrayed the electrifying Mystico character before he tried his hand at WWE. Mystico is widely regarded as one of the biggest box office draws in Mexican history, with his high-flying style often considered better than that of his legendary Lucha Libre counterparts. Mystico's accolades in Mexico landed him a high-profile contract in WWE, where he would be one of the first signings of their new talent division, rebranded as Sin Cara. He failed to capture the magic he had in Mexico due to communication constraints and growing pains of working a North American style of pro wrestling. And let's see here. Despite how that career panned out, nobody can take anything away from Mystico as one of the all-time greats in Lucha Libre. So Mystico there is number 4 on the all-timers list. James Lawrence says, no, Sin Cara is not better than Ultimo Dragon or Vader. So anyway, so let's move on to number 3. Who are the top 3? Well, number 3, this is going to cause an uproar because I feel like this is easily the number 1 on most lists. But number 3 is El Santo. He is number 3. And it's more than just a masked wrestler in his home country of Mexico. He translated to mainstream appeal as an icon of Mexico. He was a John Cena type figure, is what they say here. I think that's truly a John Cena type figure in Mexico. El Santo used his popularity to launch a prominent movie career that included over 50 Lucha Libre films. Like many masked legends, El Santo never lost a match where his prestigious mask was on the line. And following his retirement, he bequeathed his prestige to his son, who carried on the El Santo tradition with pride. So there he is. El Santo. But I feel like John Cena's unfair. Like, he's like bigger than Hulk Hogan in terms of popularity. Like, as far as in Mexico, El Santo was hot stuff, man.
Yeah, that's not a bad pick. I like him. Again, I think beyond his mat ability, which was there, he was really, man, he was the first big like Mexican cultural icon. And of course, he would even draw some of his contemporaries like Mil Mascaras into the Lucha Libre cinema, which is a distinctly Mexican thing, man. I mean, he would battle robots, vampires, aliens, yeah, I like that pick. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that at all. That's a good one.
You're lining right up with James Lawrence says, I'm not mad at El Santo at number 3. But Front Row says number 1 better be Lucha House Party. Patrick Griffith's unhappy said Santo not being number 1 is a miscarriage of justice. Give me a break.
You got an argument. You got an argument, Patrick. You that argument can be made. I don't disagree with you in principle. I mean, I think when you get to, if this list is good, when you get to the top 3, there should be such little daylight between the 3 of them that we're just talking about preference points here at this point. The top 3 should be like, and I already know it's going to be jacked up because number 1's not on there, at least on my, but El Santo, I think being 3 is just like being number 1 at this point. He's definitely one of the greats. Like I was saying earlier, my wife and I, we vacation in Tulum, Mexico. It's a beautiful vacation destination, and there El Santo is like revered. They revere them like Americans should revere wrestlers. I mean, they have a certain respect in the way they esteem those legends. We should do that here. We can learn a lot from them and in the Japanese school as well. So,
John Stolman says El Santo was the Rock of Mexico. And Ron Gibson says Mil Mascaras will be number 1. So get the sparks flaring, John. Well, Ron, I want to tell you something you're not going to like to hear. And that is that number 2 on this list is Mil Mascaras. He is not number 1. So sorry to disappoint you. There he is, Mil Mascaras. Mil Mascaras is comparable to Hulk Hogan in Mexican wrestling for better and for worse, as a member of the prominent Arellano family, which includes like Alberto Del Rio, Dos Caras Sr. Mascaras became one of the biggest stars that Mexican professional wrestling has ever seen. However, Mascaras is not without his critics, namely Chris Jericho and Mick Foley, who have complained of his propensity to no-sell maneuvers during matches. Of course, Mascaras' mask was successfully defended on every occasion, and he also starred alongside fellow masked celebrity El Santo and others in a series of Lucha Libre films. He has been recognized by the WWE as one of the greatest masked wrestlers of all time, and despite a controversial career, there is no denying that few can hold a candle to his accomplishments. Number 2, Bill Mascaras. There you go.
Yeah, the man of 1,000 masks.
There you go. And surprisingly,
we all know where that leaves us.
It leaves us at, Brian Rosa already called it, Cobra Moon, number 1. We wish. One day, Thunder Rosa might be number 1 if they include painted faces as masked wrestlers. But John Stallman's already on it. Roscoe, the list is from Bleacher Report. Oh, they're telling you in the chat. Thank you, guys. And so number 1 on your list, of course, who else is left? Number 1 has to be Rey Mysterio Jr., number 1 masked wrestler of all time, according to Bleacher Report. Rey Mysterio Jr. has to be considered the greatest masked wrestler of all time for his accolades on both the international circuit and national wrestling scene. Unlike the majority of his fellow masked competitors, Rey Mysterio became a huge star in America in addition to his fame in Mexico. This product of San Diego competed in WCW, where he was the most popular cruiserweight and even holds victories over the likes of Kevin Nash, despite his diminutive frame. Mysterio didn't miss a beat when he eventually signed with the WWE to do everything that the Ultimo Dragon was supposed to do but couldn't. Mysterio inherited his gimmick from his uncle Rey Mysterio Sr., and like many next-generation Lucha Libres, he surpassed his predecessor on the strength of a career that will be considered Hall of Fame caliber no matter who you ask. Number 1 is Rey Mysterio Jr. So, there's the list.
Did they say Rey Mysterio Jr.?
That's a good question. Let's see here. They said, yes, they specifically said Rey Mysterio Jr.
Interesting, because Rey Mysterio Jr. was in WCW, was unmasked, and now he is remasked in WWE as Rey Mysterio. So,
that's a good point.
Little differentiation there.
Oh, if you lose the mask, that persona is gone forever. So, Will's not wrong.
And he did honor that. He did honor that.
Yeah.
He was Rey Mysterio Jr. I think he changed the spelling of it too when he came to WWE. So it's like a slight differentiation. That's how he was able to get back under the mask and continue what he was doing. But just
he found a loophole,
semantics.
Man. He found a loophole.
semantics. But I just wondered if they said Rey Mysterio or Rey Mysterio Jr. because that would technically be his. I mean, I guess they're right. I mean, that was his most popular was probably, his WCW run. I mean, that's where he became a household name. So yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think they just mean the guy under the mask is really what they're focused in on. And so, because they're obviously talking about his WCW career there at first, but also that he came to WWE and managed to succeed as a superstar. He's like the one guy, I mean, in the days like now where, his size would impact him. And arguably Vince still didn't love it. But, you don't see anybody really bitch about him having been a world heavyweight champion, Rey Mysterio. So, he surpassed everybody. But Brian Rosa in here throwing it out. The top 10 should be wrestlers that never took the mask off. So there's some shade thrown.
Yeah.
Thrown Ray's way.
You can't argue with Rey, but you look at that. You named 35 men on that list, and no mention was made of Jody Hamilton, the Masked Assassin. No mention was made of the Midnight Rider. No mention was made of Bullet Bob Armstrong, the Bullet. That he, that he would go under. I mean, there's no Mr. Wrestling number 2. Was he up there? Surely he was up there, right? In the top 35?
He was, he was on there. Wrestling 1
Okay.
and 2 were on there.
Gotcha. It's just when you get names like that are in my book should be obviously top 10 guys, and you don't even mention the Masked Assassin, there's something not right. That's a short sighted, or the Bullet. You don't mention those guys. You don't mention it's just, yeah, man. It was like
Ryan Romano on it.
list.
Mr. Wrestling 2 was
Thank
number
you, Ryan.
19. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
And Mr. Wrestling 1 was number 20. All right. Well, look at this. We'll just real quick. We'll just I'll plow right through this. The Sportster, I just pulled it up for the heck of it. They have the 15. 15 is Psychosis, 14 La Parka, 13 Cade, 12 Mankind, 11 Masked Superstar / Axe. They put here. Number 10, Mr. Wrestling 2. Number 9, Ultimo Dragon. Number 8, Kendo Nagasaki, who was not even on that list before. Number 7, The Assassins. And number 6, El Solitario. And number 5, Mil Mascaras. Number 4, Jushin Liger. Number 3, The Destroyer. Number 2, Ray Ray. And number 1, Tiger Mask. So the Sportster just on like on a whole other place over there.
Here's a list that I liked.
Audience.
Yeah, no doubt. Here's a list that I liked, and I did disagree with the honorable mention. This was just a top 10 list. It was from bell to bell. Very good list. I mean, I would probably order these differently, but most of these guys you can make a credible case. They had El Santo and Mil Mascaras at honorable mention, and I disagree with that. And I listened to that particular episode, and they said, look, this is not because they don't deserve to be number 1. It's just because we're listening to the people that we were familiar with, and we like I was saying earlier, we knew them from the magazine only from afar, so we didn't get to. So they included them as honorable mention, but then in their top 10 they had the Midnight Rider at number 10, the Spoiler at number 9, Jody Hamilton or the Masked Assassin at number 8, Rey Mysterio Jr. at number 7, the Bullet at number 6, Jushin Thunder Liger at number 5, Tiger Mask at number 4, Mr. Wrestling number 2 at number 3, the Masked Superstar Bill Eadie at number 2, and then number 1 was the Destroyer or Dr. X. I like that list.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah.
Roscoe Great Sasuke was mentioned on the original list, the Bleacher Report list. He was at number 30 on that list. Blue Demon Jr., Willie, was never brought up. Not so far. He hasn't been mentioned.
I guess they brought up Blue Demon Sr.
Yeah, they did bring up Senior. Hayabusa was never on any of the lists. Spoiler was, Terry, Spoiler made it on the original list. Interesting. I mean, it's all, I guess it's subjective, but we should make the definitive list. We should have just gone in there.
I thought Rob was going to show up with one.
I
thought so too.
Analysis. We ran our program that we spent the weekend writing a Pascal script and coding and all that, and ran the win-loss record and the monetary figures and we generated the top 10 list of all time. And something was wrong with the formatting or something, and we weren't able to. It crashed, and then it just Retromania popped up.
I'm so sorry, front row. It's Sasuke. Great Sasuke. Roscoe, what else? Samurai in there. Jack Stade. Is that Jack Stade's masked persona, Roscoe? All right, here. One more, just for the hell of it. Let's run through it real quick. Here's Watt Culture, who they're pretty popular in the wrestling scene right now. They say number 10 is Ultimo Dragon. And number 9, they say is a tie. Blue Demon Jr. they give to number 9. Number 8, they say, is Kane. Number 7, they tie with Kendo Nagasaki and Mil Mascaras. So they're hedging here. It's got a bunch of ties. Number 6 is Jushin Thunder Liger. Number 5, The Destroyer. Number 4, Tiger Mask 1. And number 3 Mr. Wrestling 2. Number 2, Rey Mysterio. They just say Rey Mysterio, Will. And number 1, they have as El Santo as number 1 at What Culture. So
I wish one of these lists would have dug deep and threw the Masked Marvel on there or the Masked Wrestler from those early days as pioneers and forerunners of the tradition. Certainly Masked Marvel should be on the list.
You would feel, I mean, the Masked Marvel just, mask anybody and he's right there. He's right there with anybody. So you want to make sure to
do this again.
Anyway, we obviously you got to check out our history of pro wrestling episode. We talk a lot about these guys in the Masked Marvel. We get a phone call from the Masked Marvel, but anyway, don't mask, don't tell. Just listen to the episode and check that out. All right. Well, what else do you guys want to run through as we wind down our evening here, I guess?
Yeah, we about covered it. Unless anybody in the chat has anything to add. I like talking about stuff like this and just feeling out, everybody comes from a different place and has different influences, and every generation has masked wrestling at a different place. I mean, I look at now and I don't, here in America at least, it's not as prominent. We've got a few, big names out there, and I think AEW in particular has probably the most masked wrestlers that are active and that are big parts of storylines. And but it's just always interesting to see when that next kind of big masked wrestler. I mean, we've got the Lucha Bros right now in AEW that people mention a lot in the chat, and with good reason. And you got various members of the Dark Order over in AEW that are masked. And obviously Rey Mysterio still kicking it. But it's a fun conversation. I like these kind of conversations just to see where everyone's coming from, get all the different viewpoints.
Yeah, we did go ahead, Rob.
I was just gonna say, go to our Discord, man. Throw some ideas. We want to start doing these on Sunday evenings, having these type of roundtable discussions. You've got a topic that interests you. The world of wrestling is so multifaceted and so rich. I saw someone in there mention maybe we can do a discussion on the painted wrestlers, and there's no telling where we could go with this. So don't forget to be active, even if it's not Tuesday night or Sunday night. We're active almost every day in the Discord, and just get in there, shoot some ideas. We'd love to hear some topics. This kind of stuff I think is really, really fun.
Yeah, it's funny. Like masked wrestlers, I feel like there's something immediately that stands out about them as opposed to most wrestlers. Just like especially as a young guy, like watching wrestling. Like they're just fun. There's like a very like superhero aspect to them, so it's fun seeing the masked wrestlers. I always was a big fan. I was trying to think of like who really stood out to me as a kid as a masked wrestler. I remember the Blue Blazer like very vaguely, like as a kid. I mean, I remember him coming back as like later on and stuff like that. But I don't know. I was a huge fan of all the luchadors in WCW. I loved that. Like I saw Psychosis get a shout out on one of those lists. He's underrated. Psychosis is fantastic, but yeah, Liger is very fun. Painted wrestlers would be an interesting topic, Rob. I think we should do that sometime. But anyway, I guess if nobody has anything else to add, we had a lot of suggestions in the chat rooms, in the Discord. There was talk about obviously Kane and Tiger Mask and Rey Mysterio, and the Patriot was mentioned early on. Vader was mentioned. There was a discussion like you saw with Rob. I think you talked about at the top. that Dave Marquez talked with you about Abyss being a masked wrestler or not, that kind of stuff. I was looking through Twitter just to give some shout outs here. The new Undergod said, I've heard of Mil Mascaras and Mystico, and I was watching some New Japan and All Japan matches. I was so interested, I started to watch Lucha Libre more often, and I wanted to know a lot more. I like them as any other wrestler, but each time I see a luchador, I think of tradition in their family. This is interesting. Like, just he got caught up in the luchador aspect of things as a Japanese fan. And Dave Scooby pointing out Red River Jack. Thumb of Sloth Style bringing up JYD as Stagger Lee. And Mr. America, Blue Blazer, Dusty as the Midnight Rider, that sort of thing. I see Mil Mascaras mentioned again, Kendo Nagasaki. That's from Chris Flackett. Willie Williams bringing up question mark. We'll always give a shout out to question mark there. And let's see. Ogmund Prime says, any mass team where the body types matched, like the infamous partner switch without a tag, is still one of my favorite heel tactics. The interns, the Super Ds, the Texas Hangmen, they all fit the bill. KS Davis was a big Blitzkrieg fan at 99. He also dug Super Calo. And let's see here. Elder Sour.
You had War Machine that joined the Four Horsemen during the War Games era. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, yeah. 15th Street Marketing says Thunderfoot 1 and 2 pre-Crockett Cup. Why? Because they were forced to sell against their will. They had no choice. Runner-up, Golden Terror, Deacon Blue. Those are some names I'm not familiar with. Mr. Troy bringing up Ray Fury, who's around right now. And, here is, sorry, I'm just running through the Twitter list here, but Tommy Wrestles mentions the Villanos, all of those guys. Let's see here. And then Luke Michaels again bringing up the question mark. So all of those names, Damian Redmond, Matt Anza, Killshot, Son of Havoc, and Ryan Wilcox bringing up our old friend, Gentleman Jervis, master of the Rockabye Slam. So many great and talented individuals went through Chikara, up in Allentown and Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Mike Quackenbush's promotion. I don't think it's active anymore, but you had some really, they were distinctively masked. I mean, you had people in there. You had like Eddie Kingston and Blackjack. I forget Blackjack's last name, but they went as the wild cards, and you had, Quackenbush and all that. But you had a whole host of great masked wrestlers. Hallow Wicked. I mean, it's just a ton of guys that came through there, and I think Jervis probably at some point made his way through Chikara Pro as well. Ryan Romano throwing in here. This is a good idea. Let's do a night where we rank the wrestlers of Mission Pro. I have that list ready to go. I'd be interested to see that, Ryan. You gotta throw that our way. That'll be fun. Let's see here. I'm trying to just get everybody in here. Terry McDermott saying Tulsa's version of Dr. X was great. Eric Dale saying Lord Humongous in Championship Wrestling in Memphis. The Red Devil mentioned here. Willie Bowen mentioned him. Rocky Johnson as Sweet Ebony Diamond. And there was a bat man, a bat with two T's, man. Damien, we threw up Arachnaman. We threw up Arachnaman, Damien. There he is in all his glory. All right, guys. Well, it's that time. I guess we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here and get on our merry way. It's Sunday night. Thank you all for being here with us. I love talking to you guys and just chatting about wrestling, just being a part of this crew and having fun and just I don't know. These Sunday roundtables could be interesting, and we'll try to get the questions out sooner so you guys can fill in and become prepared with stuff. We got a lot of ideas, but if you have topic ideas that you want to do roundtables on, throw it to us. Let us know. You can hit us up at tipwshow@gmail.com or just at tipwshow on all the social medias. We love you guys. Seriously. Thank you so much for hanging out with us and just like spur of the moment showing up on a Sunday night and just chilling, talking about wrestling, just reminiscing, hitting on the nostalgia. I think we finally just come to terms with this is our lane. Like we love like the nostalgia aspect of wrestling. We like wrestling history. We like just talking about wrestling loosely. And obviously we love our NWA, but we'll be over on their channel for that on Tuesday night. So we hope you join us there after Power. If you haven't already done it on Fight TV, you gotta jump on Power. And I don't know, is anybody out there, you're not on Power or you're not already on Fight TV watching Power? I'd love to know why. I'd love to hear your feedback on that because it's $4.99. It's like, go get skip your Subway sandwich for one night and you can have a month of NWA Power. Fantastic wrestling.
It's a good deal.
Can't beat that. Can't beat it. So anyway, anything you guys want to add before we close this thing out?
Happy Easter, man.
We'll see you guys on Tuesday.
Oh, happy Easter, Rob. Old JC kicked out right at the 3 count.
I made a point. I said I'm not responding to any of Gary's memes today. Although the rabbits were funny. The rabbits were funny, man.
Man,
those were terrifying. Those scared me. I watched them this morning. I was like, "What the hell is this?"
Oh man, lots of people were excited by those. I don't know. I got on a kick last night. I was like, you know what? I found a few Easter memes, and then I was like, I'm just gonna do a theme. Get it ready for Sunday. Going into Sunday, it's gonna be all Easter memes, and then let's find the creepiest Easter pictures we can find. And turns out
you did it.
There's lots of them.
Yep.
So
yeah.
Anyway, all right. Well, that's at This Is Will Martin. So hit him up on Twitter. Send your nudes there. This is Dr. Stinson. And send your medical questions there. If Will tells you something looks weird, send it over to Dr. Stinson. And then he'll give his medical opinion on that. And I am at This Is Gary Horn. Don't talk to me. And thank you guys so much for I'm just kidding. Anyway,
if you like love you guys Easter bunnies, you'll love Gary.
Yeah, follow me on Instagram for all the creepy Easter bunnies you can stand. But seriously, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. We hope to see you on Tuesday night right after NWA Power over on the NWA's YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, please do so. We'd love to have you. And if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube, or you know people that watch YouTube and haven't subscribed to us, just tell everybody to subscribe to us. We're trying to get to 1,000. We need 1,000 subscribers. That's our ultimate goal, and we're working our way there. But slowly but surely, you guys can help. But only if you feel like it, because we're laid back. We cool. Anyway, all right. Thanks for hanging out. And until next time, enjoy your gravy cake.